You know, there's something rather curious that happens when one begins to wake up. And I don't mean waking up in the morning or reaching for the coffee pot. I mean really waking up, seeing through the great masquerade of life. And what's curious is that after all the fireworks, all the ecstasy and wonder that may come with your first taste of awakening, there is silence. Not a dull silence, mind you. Not the heavy hush of boredom, but a quiet so vast, so unhurried, that the mind doesn't quite know what to do with it. The self, which has been running and running all these years towards some imagined finish line, suddenly stops and finds there's nowhere to run to. The engine of becoming sputters and dies, and all that remains is the soft hum of being. And this can be terribly confusing, you see, because for as long as we can remember, we've been taught to measure life by its movement, by how much we accomplish, how far we progress, how fast we go. We've been conditioned to feel alive only when we are on the way to somewhere else. So when the striving suddenly stops, when there's no more ladder to climb, we think something's gone terribly wrong. Where did my passion go? Why don't I care about all those goals I used to chase? But perhaps nothing's gone wrong at all. Perhaps what you've lost is not passion, but pressure, the compulsive drive to be something more than you already are. For when the illusion of the separate self begins to fade, the whole machinery that ran on dissatisfaction begins to fall apart. You no longer have to prove your existence by running faster. This is why many people, right after an awakening, feel a strange kind of emptiness, as if the meaning has leaked out of everything. But it hasn't. The meaning was never in the running, it was in the being. Only now, you are no longer hypnotized by the chase. It's a little like stepping off a spinning merry-go-round. For a while, the world still seems to whirl, and you feel dizzy, disoriented. Your body wants to keep moving, even though the ride has stopped. The habit of speed lingers. And in that awkward stillness, you may find yourself wondering, what now? What am I supposed to do with this stillness? And the answer, of course, is nothing. You don't have to do anything with it. The stillness is not a problem to be solved. It is the beginning of seeing. It's the moment when you finally hear the faint rhythm that was playing underneath the noise all along the rhythm of existence itself. You see, most of us mistake movement for meaning, noise for life, struggle for purpose. But the universe, in its quiet way, has always been humming without our effort. The heart beats, the planets turn, the stars burn, and none of them need to be motivated. They simply are. So too, when the storm of striving subsides and the waves of desire calm, you begin to sense the still ocean beneath it all. You realize that you were never separate from that great movement. You were always the sea pretending to be the storm. And that's why this quiet, this strange, almost eerie peace comes not as punishment, but as revelation. It's the moment the actor steps off the stage and realizes that the play will go on just fine without his pretending to control it. Don't rush to fill that silence with new goals or higher purposes. Let it be. Sit with it. This is the sound of the universe breathing through you. The mind will protest. It will say, I must do something. I must become something. But notice that even this voice arises in the silence, dances for a moment, and disappears back into it. This is the real awakening. Not some mystical fireworks, but the discovery that behind all the thunder and striving, there is a vast, untroubled presence, and it has been there the whole time, waiting patiently for you to notice. So when your motivation dies, don't rush to resuscitate it. Attend instead to the stillness that remains. For in that stillness, life is not absent, it is finally present. You see, from the very beginning, we are trained to believe that life is a sort of escalator, always going up, always moving towards something called success, or fulfillment, or enlightenment. We are told that the purpose of being alive is to become something more, a better version of ourselves, a more virtuous person, a wiser soul. And so we spend our lives in a kind of spiritual treadmill, forever taking steps but never arriving. We are born into a system that whispers in our ears from the first day, "You are not quite enough yet, but one day you will be, if you just try hard enough." And naturally, we believe it, because everyone around us is running too. The whole society is built upon the idea that the universe is an unfinished project, and that your job is to fix it, to fix yourself. Now, I've often said that this is rather like telling the waves of the ocean that they must get somewhere. The poor waves believe it. They rush toward the shore, thinking, if only I could break just right, I'd be perfect. But the shore isn't the goal, it's just where the wave returns to itself. You see, the machinery of becoming is powered by the sense of incompleteness. It feeds upon dissatisfaction the way a fire feeds upon air. Every advertisement, every religious sermon, every well-meaning teacher is, in some sense, reminding you of what you lack and then offering you a method to get it. But the great cosmic joke is that the self, which is trying to become complete, is itself the illusion. The more you chase completion, the more you affirm your incompleteness. It's like trying to smooth out water with an iron. The more you press, the more ripples you make. So we become professional strivers. We chase better jobs, higher pay, more knowledge, deeper meditations, purer diets, longer lifespans, all under the banner of improvement. And yet, no matter how much we accomplish, that whisper returns, not enough yet. Because the machine that says I must become has no off switch until awakening comes, and suddenly, inexplicably, you see through the whole thing. And that's when your motivation collapses, because you've seen the trick. You've looked behind the curtain and found no little man pulling the levers. The mechanism of self-improvement keeps spinning, but there's no one left inside to run it. It's a rather disorienting discovery. Like realizing that the runner and the race were the same motion all along. You were never a separate self sprinting towards some distant goal. You were always the unfolding of the race itself, a process, not a person. Now, most people, upon glimpsing this, feel both relief and terror. Relief, because the endless striving finally begins to loosen its grip. Terror, because the identity that was built upon striving begins to dissolve. Who are you when there is nothing left to become? The machinery of becoming cannot answer that question. It was built to chase, not to see. And so it sputters and stalls, like a clock that suddenly realized time is an illusion. But let's not condemn the machinery entirely. It served its purpose. For without that restless hunger, you might never have sought truth at all. The ego's dissatisfaction is what drove you to the gate, and now, having arrived, it bows out of the story. The tragedy is that many of us, upon feeling this quiet, rush to repair the machine, to reignite the old sense of purpose, to find a new project, to justify ourselves. We think, I must find my next goal, my next version of enlightenment. And so the cycle begins again, another mask, another chase. But awakening invites you to see the absurdity of this, to laugh gently at the cosmic joke. The universe, playing hide and seek with itself, pretending to be lost so it can enjoy the fun of being found. And when you see that, when you truly see that, something miraculous happens. The machinery doesn't break, it transforms. It no longer grinds forward with the sound of striving, but turns smoothly with the rhythm of play. You realize you can still do things, still create, still love, and build and explore, but now not as a desperate climb toward meaning. It's all play, the same movement, but with music instead of noise. And that, you see, is where we begin to move from the struggle of becoming into the grace of dancing, which is where our journey now turns. You see, Once the machinery of becoming begins to slow down, something rather unsettling occurs. The one who was doing all the striving, the striver, begins to fade. And at first, it feels like death, because for as long as you can remember, that striver has been your identity. It's the voice in your head that said, come on, you can do better. The little engine that believed, if it just pushed hard enough, it could finally arrive somewhere called enlightenment, success, peace. That voice built your sense of self, brick by brick. Every ambition, every achievement, every plan was another wall of the house you called me. And now, with awakening, the foundation cracks. The house begins to crumble. You realize there never was a solid self inside at all, only a collection of habits, memories, and dreams repeating themselves like an echo in an empty room. This is what I mean by the death of the striver. Not physical death, but the end of psychological ownership, the collapse of the illusion that there is someone inside the mind steering the whole show. Naturally, it's frightening. For the first time, you feel as though you're standing on the edge of a cliff with no ground beneath your feet. The old motivations no longer move you, and the new ones haven't yet appeared. You used to wake up with a list of things to do. Now you wake up and simply wake up. And the mind protests, this can't be right. I'm losing my purpose. I'm losing my drive. But what you're really losing is the fiction of control. The eye that was supposedly driving your life is being seen through, and it resists vanishing because its entire existence depends on pretending to be necessary. It's a bit like finishing a play after years of acting. The lights go out, the audience leaves, and suddenly you're standing backstage, still wearing the costume, not quite sure where to go. For a moment you wonder, if I am not that character, who am I? The ego trembles at this silence, because it cannot survive without a story. It will do anything to keep the narrative alive, even to invent a new spiritual identity. I am now the awakened one, the humble sage, which, of course, is just the same old ego in more respectable clothing. But if you can resist the temptation to grab a new mask, to fill the gap with a new role, you will notice something marvelous. Beneath the unease, there is peace, a peace so simple that the mind almost overlooks it. The death of the striver is not the end of life. It is the beginning of living without effort. The river no longer believes it must flow. It just flows. The wind doesn't plan where to blow. It simply moves. And you too begin to discover that life continues quite beautifully without the constant supervision of the me. It's astonishing. Really. Work still gets done. Meals still get cooked. Conversations still happen, but no one seems to be doing them. The body moves. Words appear. Ideas arise, all spontaneously, like music playing itself. You might laugh one day and realize, good heavens, I've been alive all along, but I was so busy trying to live that I never noticed. You see, the death of the striver is not a tragedy. It's liberation. For as long as you thought you were the doer, you carried the burden of success and failure, guilt and pride. But once you see that life is happening of its own accord, those weights fall away. The responsibility to become dissolves into the joy of being. And yes, there will be moments of melancholy, moments where you miss your old ambition, your old identity. You'll catch yourself wanting to resurrect the striver, perhaps just to feel busy again. But eventually you'll smile at that impulse the way a parent smiles at a child's game. For you'll see that the actor never truly dies. It was never real to begin with. It was the play of consciousness, pretending to be a person chasing after tomorrow. Now the pretending has stopped, and what remains is silence, spacious and alive. So when the striver dies, do not mourn him. Bow to him, thank him for his service, for he brought you to this moment, and then let him go. Because only in his absence can you finally hear the music of life playing through you. And Once you begin to move with that music, without a destination, without a goal, you discover something the striver could never imagine, that the point was never to arrive, but to dance. Now, once the striver has died a quiet death, once the smoke clears and the echo of ambition fades, something wonderful begins to happen. You find that the world hasn't stopped moving at all. In fact, it's still dancing. It always was. Only now you're no longer trying to lead the dance. You've realized you are the dance. You see, before awakening, life feels like a climb, always upward, always forward. We imagine there's some summit, enlightenment, success, heaven, whatever we call it, and when we reach it, then we'll finally be complete. And so we strain, we sweat, we cling to the next handhold, terrified of falling behind. But after awakening, you discover there was never a mountain to climb. There was only the movement itself, and it was never going up. It was swirling, turning, spiraling, like music. You weren't climbing at all. You were dancing, though you didn't know the steps. I've often said that life is musical in nature. Its point isn't to get to the end of the song. Imagine listening to a symphony and demanding the final note immediately. The joy is in the unfolding, in the melody itself. In exactly the same way, the purpose of life is not to reach the end of the road, but to walk, to wander, to play. But we humans, clever creatures that we are, insist on treating the dance as a marathon. We forget that the beauty of the waltz lies in not arriving. We want to grab the music, to freeze it, to bottle it up like perfume, but the moment you try to hold a note, it dies. When the striving self dissolves, you begin to feel the rhythm that was there all along the pulse of life, moving effortlessly through every moment. Breathing becomes music. Walking becomes rhythm. Even washing the dishes becomes choreography. You see, doing for the sake of doing, that is the new motivation. Not to achieve, not to prove, not to earn, but simply to participate in the grand improvisation. Think of the dancer. If she dances to reach the end of the floor, she misses the dance entirely. The joy isn't in the destination, it's in this step, and this one, and this one. When you discover that, you stop rushing. You stop asking, where is this going? Because you realize that here is where it's going. The dance doesn't need direction. It only needs attention. And what replaces the old motivation is something softer, wiser, not a whip of desire, but a pulse of curiosity. You still act, you still create, but now the doing flows like laughter, not labor. You may notice that your work changes. You no longer work merely to reach an outcome. You work because working is an expression of being alive. You paint because painting happens through you. You speak because the universe has something to say in your voice. And you discover something delicious. When you no longer demand results, the results take care of themselves. The tree doesn't strive to bear fruit. It blossoms, because that's what trees do. When you move from the climb to the dance, everything becomes lighter. The sense of duty transforms into delight. Even difficulties, even pain, become part of the choreography, dissonant notes in the song that make it richer. Now, of course, the mind will occasionally whisper, but shouldn't I be doing something important? And you can laugh, because you finally see that this too is part of the music, the drumbeat of the ego still echoing faintly. You don't need to silence it. Just dance with it. To dance is to trust that life knows the rhythm even when you don't, to let yourself be moved rather than to move yourself. And when you live like that, a strange thing happens. The world that once seemed so heavy, full of problems to solve, ladders to climb, reputations to build, becomes playful again, as it was when you were a child. You no longer wake up thinking, what must I achieve today? But rather, What will life show me today? That is true freedom. Not the freedom from movement, but the freedom to move without fear, to act without clutching, to live as if each step of the dance is complete in itself, because it is. So you see, when the climb ends, the music begins. And the grand discovery is that the music was playing all along. You were just too busy trying to conduct the orchestra to hear it. Now, once you've stopped climbing and started dancing, another mystery appears, one that both delights and puzzles the mind. You begin to notice that life still happens, that things still get done, that movement continues, but somehow no one seems to be doing it. The actions that once felt forced now flow on their own. You have discovered what the Taoists call wu-wei effortless action, doing without doing. Now that sounds rather absurd, doesn't it? How can one do something without doing it? How can work happen without a worker? But you see, this is the very paradox of nature itself. The tree grows leaves, the stars shine, the heart beats, and the lungs breathe, yet none of them are straining to make it happen. The universe is an endless happening that happens by itself. We, however, have been educated to think that unless we push, nothing moves. We imagine ourselves as little managers of reality, constantly prodding the world into functioning. If I don't hold it together, we think, it will all fall apart. But when you wake up, you realize it never depended on you at all. You were the wave believing it was carrying the ocean. When this realization dawns, there is an immense sense of relief. Life doesn't need to be driven. It unfolds. The sun doesn't get up in the morning because it feels responsible for daylight. It rises simply because that's its nature. And in that same way, you begin to act from your own nature, not out of will, but out of spontaneity. Things get done more cleanly, more beautifully, more efficiently even, but without the inner tension that once accompanied every effort. I like to say it's the difference between swimming and flailing. When you fight the water, you sink. When you relax and align yourself with it, the very same water holds you up. In the same way, the awakened person moves with the current of life, not against it. Now, people often misunderstand this and think it means passivity, doing nothing at all, sitting around in some divine stupor. Not at all. Wu-wei is not the absence of action, it's the absence of forcing. It's the discovery that what you used to call your will was in fact the universe's will all along. When you truly see this, even ordinary activities, writing, cooking, walking, become meditations in motion. You're not trying to be mindful. Mindfulness is simply there because there is no interference. The mind isn't screaming, do it right. It's quiet, and the hands move as they know how to move. You see, the body has its own intelligence. The same intelligence that arranges the galaxies is arranging your heartbeat. So when you get out of your own way, that intelligence expresses itself through you. You become like a flute through which the universe plays its tune. And how much easier life becomes when you stop trying to play the song yourself. For as long as you thought you were the musician, you were full of anxiety. Am I playing the right note? Will they like my performance? But now, there's only the music, flowing effortlessly, and you realize you were never separate from it. This effortless effort is not lazy, it is alive. It is full of vitality, yet free of strain. When you move in that state, even work feels like rest. You can spend hours painting, gardening, solving problems, and you don't feel drained, because the energy doesn't come from a little ego battery inside you. It comes from the source of everything. The paradox, you see, is that when you stop trying to control life, life begins to work through you with exquisite precision. The actions that once felt mechanical now feel graceful. The words that once felt rehearsed now come alive. Even mistakes become part of the rhythm, syncopations in the universal jazz. And this is the great secret that the striver could never understand, that real accomplishment begins the moment you stop trying to accomplish anything. Once you stop forcing the flower to open, it blooms of its own accord. Once you stop demanding perfection, things fall into harmony. And when you stop fighting the current, you discover you were never separate from the river. You are the river. So, the paradox of effortless effort is not a technique. You cannot try to do it, because trying itself is the problem. You can only notice that life is already happening, that movement is already moving, and that the you who thought it had to make everything happen was only ever an afterthought. And when you see that not merely as an idea, but as a living experience, you will laugh. You will laugh at how simple it all is. Because all your life, you've been the ocean pretending to be a wave, straining to splash just right, when all along, the ocean was moving perfectly by itself. And in that laughter, that deep, knowing laughter effort melts into ease. Now, my dear friends, when all this striving stops, when the machinery of becoming falls silent, when the old ambitions lose their grip, when the ego realizes it is not the captain but the current, there comes, quite naturally, a tremor of unease. Because, you see, for most of our lives, meaning has been something we manufacture. We thought it was the prize for effort, the trophy for endurance, the certificate of having done life correctly. If I achieve enough, then my life will mean something. And when that whole scaffolding collapses, well, it can feel as though the ground itself has vanished. People often write to me and say, "Alan, since awakening, I don't feel motivated. Nothing seems to matter anymore. I used to care about so much my career, my plans, even my spiritual progress. Now it all feels hollow." And I tell them, of course it does. Because the thing that felt hollow was the one doing all the caring. You have peeled away the layer that needed life to mean something in order to justify itself. When the self disappears, so does the meaning it invented, and that can be frightening. Like a boatman whose oars have dissolved, you sit adrift on a still sea thinking, what now? But here's the paradox. That sense of meaninglessness is not the end of life's meaning. It is the end of false meaning. It's the shedding of the imaginary purpose you thought you needed in order to live. Meaninglessness is not the void swallowing you up. It is the vastness of reality revealing itself without your labels. It's what happens when you stop painting the sky and finally look at it. You see, life does not need a reason any more than a song needs a moral. It's enough that it's being sung. The universe doesn't justify itself, it is itself. Stars don't twinkle for a cause. Flowers don't bloom to prove a point. They simply can't help it. We, however, have been taught to fear this kind of freedom. We think, if nothing matters, then why do anything? But that's precisely the misunderstanding. When you see that everything is the dance, you don't stop dancing, you just stop dancing for a reward. There's a tremendous lightness in that. You no longer live under the burden of cosmic responsibility, trying to make sure the universe approves of you. You realize the universe was never judging you to begin with. It was too busy being you. And then a new kind of meaning dawns, not the meaning of purpose, but the meaning of presence. Life doesn't have meaning. It is meaning. Just as light doesn't need to illuminate itself, consciousness doesn't need a reason to exist. The miracle is that it does. This realization transforms your relationship to everything. Even the smallest things, a cup of tea, a passing breeze, a bird call at dawn, shimmer with quiet significance, though you could never explain why. They are meaningful not because they point to something else, but because they are themselves fully. This is what happens when the artificial quest for purpose dissolves. You begin to see that what you used to call meaning was a shadow cast by separation. When the self vanishes, the need for meaning vanishes with it. And what remains is the luminous simplicity of being. But beware, the ego may try to turn even this into another project. Now my purpose is to live without purpose. And there it goes again, sneaking in through the back door. So laugh at it. Let it try. Because you know now that even that, too, is part of the dance. The truth is, once you stop demanding meaning from life, life starts to sparkle again. You begin to sense that the meaning is not hidden somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered. It's woven into the very fabric of existence. When you stop chasing meaning, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The silence hums. The simple act of breathing feels miraculous. And you realize the great secret was never about finding meaning, but about being it. So, if you ever find yourself feeling that strange hollowness after awakening, do not despair. Don't rush to fill the emptiness. Sit quietly within it. That emptiness is not a mistake. It's the spaciousness in which everything true can finally appear. You have not lost meaning. You've lost your addiction to artificial meaning. And in that loss, the real meaning, the living pulse of the universe, begins to sing again. And when it does, you find that you no longer ask, "Why am I here?" Because you are the why. Now, after all this, after the striving dissolves, the self unravels, and the fever of meaning-making cools, something quite beautiful occurs. You begin to live again. Only this time, it's different. You've returned to the ordinary world, but you are no longer ordinary within it. This is what the Zen masters call returning to the marketplace with open hands. The enlightenment that once felt like a mountaintop revelation settles quietly into the rhythm of daily living, of bills and traffic lights, of laughter and laundry. And yet, everything glows just a little. You see, awakening is not an escape from the world. It is a rediscovery of it. You realize that the same divine play that moved galaxies also moves your spoon through your morning tea. You still pay your taxes, still get stuck in traffic, still forget where you left your keys, but now there's a gentleness to it all, a kind of cosmic humor, because you see through it. You know it's a game, and you can play it fully without getting lost in it. People sometimes imagine that to be spiritually awake is to float serenely through life, untouched by circumstance. Not at all. The awakened one still feels joy and sadness, still faces the full spectrum of human experience. But what's changed is the relationship to it. The waves still rise and fall, but the ocean no longer panics. You may find that your work changes not necessarily in form, but in flavor. The pressure to prove yourself dissolves. You may still build, create, teach, or heal. But now the doing arises from love, not lack. You are not working to become someone. You are simply expressing what life wants to express through you. Even mundane tasks begin to shimmer with significance. You chop wood, you carry water, and you do it with the same presence once reserved for meditation. The sacred has slipped its robe of ritual and put on the clothes of the everyday. You might notice that others around you are still running, still striving. Some will find your calmness confusing. They'll say, "You've changed, you don't seem to care anymore." But that's not true at all. You care more deeply now, only not with the anxious clutch of control. You care like the sun cares, shining, because it cannot help but shine. And this is the paradox of awakening. You become more fully human, not less. You weep more easily. You laugh more freely. You love more wholly, because there's no one left inside to protect. The old mask of seriousness, of self-importance, melts away. You learn to play the human game sincerely, yet lightly. You follow the rules, not because you believe they're ultimate, but because playing gracefully keeps the harmony. You drive on the right side of the road. You keep your appointments. You say thank you, not as obligations, but as gestures of kindness within the dream. And this, you see, is what real maturity looks like. To know it's all theater and still give your best performance. To act the role of you beautifully, but never forget that it's a role. There's a story I like to tell about an old Zen master who, after enlightenment, went back to his village and became a fisherman. When asked why he didn't stay in the monastery, he smiled and said, "Because the fish were still hungry." That's the spirit of the awakened life, quietly feeding the world in small, invisible ways. You don't need a halo or a following. You help where you can, laugh when you can, and rest when you must. The world may not notice, but the universe does, because it's you. So the return to ordinary life is not a downgrade, it's the flowering of awakening. It's what happens when the sky of realization descends into the soil of humanity. And gradually you see that the so-called ordinary was never ordinary at all. It was divine all along, only disguised in the familiar. So when you wash the dishes, do it as the river washing itself. When you walk to work, walk as the earth turning under the sun. When you speak, let it be the cosmos giving itself a voice, because in truth, that's what's always been happening. Only now, you know it. You know, one of the most marvelous discoveries after awakening is that life doesn't stay still. It moves in waves, in and out, up and down, day and night, expansion and contraction. Everything in existence breathes. There are moments when you feel luminous and full of energy, as if you could embrace the whole cosmos in one great laugh. And there are other moments when you feel empty, quiet, perhaps even numb, like the sea at low tide. And it's all right. It's all the same movement. You see, most people try to live as though life were a straight line, a constant climb, an uninterrupted stream of productivity and enthusiasm. But the universe doesn't work like that. Even the heart, the very instrument of your aliveness, beats only because it pauses. Between each pulse there is rest, and without that rest, the rhythm would collapse. In the same way, the awakened life moves in cycles of energy and stillness, of expression and rest, of being and doing. When you understand this, you stop fearing the quiet phases, the times when nothing seems to happen. You recognize them as part of the great breathing of life. The ego, of course, doesn't like this at all. It's addicted to movement, to noise, to feeling on. It says, "Quick, do something. Don't waste time." But the awakened heart smiles and says, "Even this stillness is doing itself." It's a bit like music. The notes mean nothing without the silence between them. You could play every note at once, but it would just be noise. What gives music its shape is the space, the intervals, the pauses, the patience. Life, too, is a kind of music. The silence is not the absence of melody, it's what allows the melody to be heard. So there will be times when inspiration pours through you like sunlight, and you'll create, speak, move, and share with ease. And there will be other times when you feel withdrawn, quiet, uninterested in the world. Don't resist that. Don't label it as low energy or wrong. It's simply the inward breath of the same life that once exhaled so vigorously through you. Think of the tide. When the sea draws back, it isn't abandoning the shore. It's preparing to return with new strength. So too, when you find yourself still, perhaps uninspired, understand this is your soul gathering itself, ripening, preparing for the next movement. You can no more hold on to the high than you can hold your breath forever. The secret is to trust the rhythm. When you feel full, give. When you feel empty, rest. When life moves, flow with it. When it pauses, be the pause. The funny thing is, once you stop fighting these natural rhythms, even the quiet becomes full of energy. It's not boredom, it's incubation. The universe is dreaming through you, reshaping, renewing. And when the wave returns, you'll find yourself carried forward effortlessly, without plan or push. This is the art of balance, knowing that both motion and rest are expressions of the same vitality. The dance of Shiva, as the Hindus would say, includes both creation and dissolution, the step and the stillness. When you begin to live like this, there's no such thing as stagnation. Even in silence, life is humming. Even in rest, existence is alive. So instead of forcing the rhythm, listen to it. Feel it move through you, the way a musician feels the tempo through the soles of his feet. There's a wisdom in your natural timing that no planner or calendar could ever match. And you realize the cycles are not happening to you, they are you. You are the inhale and the exhale of the cosmos, the heartbeat of being itself. So, when energy rises, don't cling to it. When stillness comes, don't flee from it. Let each have its turn in the great rhythm of existence. And then, at last, you'll see that every moment, whether full or empty, fast or slow, is the same eternal movement of life resting within itself. Now, once you begin to live with that rhythm, the ebb and flow, the quiet and the movement, something extraordinary starts to bloom on its own. It's not something you plan, nor something you practice like a moral exercise. It's something that grows naturally, like wildflowers appearing after the rain. I'm speaking of compassion. You see, when the sense of a separate me dissolves, the walls that once divided you and others crumble too. And suddenly the suffering of another is not something outside of you, it feels like the echo of your own heartbeat. Their joy, your joy, their pain, your pain, but it's not sentimental. It's not the kind of compassion that says, oh, I should help. There's no should left in it. It's as spontaneous as laughter, as effortless as breathing. The strange thing is, true compassion doesn't come from trying to be good, it comes from seeing clearly. Once you realize there isn't really a you standing apart from everything else, kindness becomes as natural as gravity. You help not because you're virtuous, but because that's simply what happens when the illusion of separation fades. Let's take a simple example. Imagine your left hand gets a splinter. Do you pause to think, now, should my right hand help? Or would that be codependent? Of course not. The right hand simply removes the splinter. No debate, no moralizing, no guilt, just the natural intelligence of one organism taking care of itself. That's what happens when you wake up. You see that the whole world is one body. Every act of cruelty feels like self-harm. Every act of love feels like healing. Now, this doesn't mean you become some kind of saint or savior. In fact, the moment you start trying to be compassionate, you're already missing the point, because then compassion has become another ego project, another badge to polish. Real compassion has no owner. It moves through you. It may express itself as a kind word, a patient silence, or even a firm no. Sometimes the most loving act is not indulgence, but clarity. Compassion isn't always soft. Sometimes it cuts, like surgery, but it always heals. And what's delightful is that you begin to notice compassion not only in yourself, but everywhere. In the way the trees give shade without asking for thanks, in the way the rain falls on saints and sinners alike, in the way life sustains itself through endless giving and receiving. You realize that compassion is the very structure of existence. The sun shines because it cannot help shining. The flower blooms because it cannot help blooming. The universe, by its very nature, is generous. And when you are no longer pretending to stand apart from it, that generosity flows through you as well. There's no effort in it, no moral heroism. It's simply what happens when the heart stops being occupied with itself. The more awake you become, the less room there is for self-centeredness. And in that space, love rushes in, uninvited, unstoppable. You see, all the great sages and mystics didn't teach compassion so much as they became it. Their presence alone was enough to heal, because their being radiated that same understanding, that we are not separate waves, but one ocean, playing at being many. And when you live from that realization, you don't need to decide to be kind. You can't help it. You move through the world lightly, leaving gentleness in your wake. You might not even know it's happening, a smile here, a listening ear there, yet the ripples of that presence extend far beyond what the mind can measure. The universe, you see, loves through all of us. It forgives through all of us. It even laughs through all of us, usually at the moment we take ourselves too seriously. So when you act with compassion, don't congratulate yourself. Don't claim it as yours. Just notice that the same intelligence that makes the stars burn and the rivers flow is expressing itself as care through these hands, this voice, this life, and in that noticing, something deep inside relaxes. You realize you don't have to become loving, you already are love, disguised as a person. When compassion begins to move through you like breath, life itself becomes an artist again. Creation, which once felt like a project, a struggle toward perfection, returns to its rightful nature play. You see, once you no longer act to prove, or to possess, or to survive, a strange and wonderful thing happens. The universe begins to create through you for the sheer delight of expression. It's as though the cosmic painter has picked up the brush of your life and said, let's see what colors we can make with this one. Before awakening, creativity often came with tension. The writer feared the blank page, the musician worried about success, the worker dreaded failure. But after awakening, creation flows effortlessly, not because you've become more skillful, but because you've stopped interfering. There's no longer the anxious question, will this be good enough? Because now, good enough for whom? You see, the critic has retired. The inner supervisor has gone home. The doing becomes its own reward. The bird doesn't sing to impress anyone, it sings because it is a bird. The flower doesn't bloom to be admired, it blooms because blooming is its joy. In the same way, true creativity arises naturally from being alive, not from ambition but from abundance. And that is the secret. The universe, when left alone, is inexhaustibly creative. It's inventing galaxies, forests, lovers, and laughter, all without strain. When you realize that you are not separate from that universe, that same boundless inventiveness begins to move through you. You may paint, speak, write, dance, cook, plant, repair, or simply smile. Each becomes an act of divine mischief. Now, I don't mean that you will suddenly become an artist in the conventional sense. Not everyone will take up a brush or an instrument. But you'll find that the spirit of creation infuses everything you do. Even sweeping the floor becomes choreography. Even silence becomes poetry. The real artist is not the one who makes art, but the one who lives artfully. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you create without trying to prove anything, your creations become more beautiful, more alive, because they carry no burden. They are free. Some people ask me, Alan, how do I find my purpose after awakening? And I tell them, you don't. You lose it. And in its place you find your play. Purpose is a contract of the ego. Play is the freedom of the spirit. When you are playing, you are closest to the nature of the universe itself. For the whole cosmos, from the galaxies spinning in their luminous spirals to the tides rising and falling on the shore, is one vast act of play, lila. As the Hindus say, the divine game of hide and seek. And when you create from that place, you stop worrying about results. You don't need to be remembered, to be approved of, to be praised. You simply let the universe have its way with you. And that is joy. The great artist, the awakened one, is the person who has disappeared into what they're doing. The dancer becomes the dance. The musician becomes the music. The craftsman becomes the craft. When you lose yourself like that, the creative act becomes indistinguishable from meditation. Every movement, every gesture is a kind of prayer, not asking for anything, just celebrating that there's anything to celebrate at all. And here's the lovely secret. The more lightly you hold it, the more deeply it flows. The moment you begin to grasp, the moment you say, I must capture this, it slips away. But if you treat it like a butterfly, resting on the edge of your hand, it stays not because you caught it, but because you stopped frightening it with your seriousness. So let your creativity be like that, playful, light, full of wonder. Paint with your words, dance with your chores, sculpt with your laughter, because in the end, what you create is not the point. That you create, that life is expressing itself through you, that is the miracle. And when you live in that way, joy no longer depends on what you achieve. It flows from the simple fact that you are part of the great unfolding, the eternal improvisation that never repeats itself twice. And so, after all of this, after the striving has quieted, the fear has softened, the compassion has awakened, and the joy of creation has returned, you find yourself standing exactly where you began. The same world, the same life, the same sky above your head. But now, you see it differently. Once, you thought life was a story. You had to write a script you must perfect. Every line had to make sense. Every scene had to justify the one before. You were the author, the editor, the critic, all at once. And what a weary job that was. But now you see that life has no script. Never did. It's an improvisation, a grand jazz piece, where no note can be wrong because each note gives rise to the next. You may still plan, of course, buy groceries, set appointments, build things, love people, but the plans are light, like sketches in sand. You don't depend on them. You let the tide of events reshape them and sometimes erase them entirely. And that's perfectly fine. Because the improvisation is the joy. When you live without a script, you become available to the present. You no longer meet life with a pre-written response. You meet it fresh, alive. And because you're not clinging to what should be, you can finally see what is. And isn't it marvelous how each moment brings you exactly what you need to dance with a smile, a challenge, a silence, a sunset, each arriving like a line of dialogue you never could have written better yourself. There's a lightness in that. You stop trying to be the hero of your story and realize you're more like a character in a divine play, a play that's writing itself as it goes. And once you stop insisting on knowing how it ends, you can finally enjoy the act you're in. The ego, bless its heart, may still whisper, but what if things go wrong? To which you can reply, they already have, and it was perfect. Because in this play, even the tragedies are part of the harmony. The dissonant chord gives depth to the song. The tear in the fabric lets the light through. To live without a script is not to drift aimlessly. It's to trust the wisdom of spontaneity. It's to see that life's intelligence operates perfectly well without your constant supervision. You are not the conductor. You are the music being played. And once you feel that, once you truly feel it, all that remains is gratitude. A quiet, boundless gratitude, not towards someone or something, but toward the sheer privilege of being here at all. You wake up in the morning and realize this is the encore. You were never promised another breath, yet here it is. You walk, you breathe, you laugh, you stumble, you love, and it's all unscripted, unrepeatable, irreplaceable. And perhaps, at last, you see the whole cosmic joke, that you spent years trying to control what was never yours, and now that you've let go, everything flows just right. So play your part. Speak your lines with sincerity, even knowing they're improvised. Love the characters who cross your stage, knowing they too will exit when the curtain falls. Smile at the absurdity, the beauty, the fleetingness of it all. Because this unrepeatable moment is eternity disguised as time. And the secret, the one the sages have been whispering forever, is that you've been home all along. There was never anywhere to get to, never anything to become, just this, the living, breathing miracle of being. And when you truly see that, when it's not just words, but your very heartbeat, there's nothing left to seek. You don't cling to the dance, you are the dance. So the wisest thing you can do, the most spiritual act there is simply to live freely, lovingly, without a script, and to laugh because the universe, after all, is laughing through you.